what an absolute pleasure to have you all here this afternoon, where we're discussing and also like learning from like these amazing custodians and storytellers who are driving and shaping India's F&B industry. Over the last few years, I think the Indian food and beverage industries, they're seeing seismic shifts, courtesy not just on the consumer side, where we're seeing preferences and expectations take on this quite a quick evolution, and there's a maturity in that, but also on the market side and the demand side, where the market is a lot more ripe and ready for concepts and experiential dining or festivals or products. And I think we're with the right audience and in fine company, where essentially we're in conversation with people who are shaping that narrative and also driving that story across India. When Mohita, and I can't spot you, and thank you for this, when she was jamming about this concept, we said, okay, we're gonna kind of like divvy it up in 3 broad chunks. So the first one is also to understand not just the tipping point of what prompted you to do what you do, but also maybe then move on to understanding and getting your lens and take on the market, the consumer and the market at large. And then the third bit is going to be get some incredible off-the-record tips and insights of what makes you guys one of the principal custodians of everything you do. Does that work for you? Okay, we're going to dive right in. Just as a curveball specifically for the panel. So I threw out a Q&A on Instagram saying, for the ones who can't make it in Delhi, if you have a question for this panel, ask me and I'm going to ask. And like we're hot with questions from the audience. So I'm going to take these on towards the end. So just as a little bit of a throwback, so I run a food and drink magazine. It's called the Lab Mag. And one of the early few stories that I commissioned and worked on was a profile piece on Matt. And I just found it so exciting that in 2013, there was Matt and his partner essentially kind of like solving for a personal problem of finding good quality coffee in the country. Operating off, their parents' living room, hoping for more takers of the product. And today it is like, in the introduction we said, it's one of the most recognized brands in India today. I think just very curious to understand that at a point in time where the customer understanding of single origin, local homegrown coffee wasn't as nuanced as it is today, what prompted you to kind of like kick this off?
If I kind of look at my coffee journey, it's very similar to what I see happening in India over the last 12 years. So growing up at home, we drank instant coffee. Folgers was the brand that we had. It's like the American equivalent of Nescafe. And then when I went to college, I started drinking Starbucks because it was convenient, well-priced, but it wasn't necessarily something that I enjoyed. It was more for the functional benefits of it. It was after graduating from college, I moved to San Francisco at a time when specialty coffee was really taking off and becoming more of the mainstream coffee culture. And that really got me interested in how coffee could be so much more than just a functional drink. Where it comes from, who grows it, how it's processed, how it's roasted, how it's brewed, can really unlock a wide variety of flavors that, and coffee can be enjoyable just on its own merits. So then I started roasting coffee on my own as a hobby. Fast forward many years later, I moved to India, I ended up meeting Namrata, and we were both in points in our careers where we wanted to do something on our own. And having worked a lot of desk jobs, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more physical. So the idea of actually using my hands and roasting the coffee was very appealing. But it's not ever something that we did a business plan or anything. We just felt that, okay, this is a product that we want. It's not available. There must be others who are like us who are seeking this. And luckily, it kind of just very took off. We were roasting out of a small bedroom in my wife's parents' house, selling online, doing farmers markets, trying to do events just to build the community. And then it grew through word of mouth for the first couple of years.
It's really amazing because right outside we were catching up and I asked him, how many cups of coffee do you drink? And he looked at me as if I've asked like the silliest question ever. And he's like, there is no cap. What do you mean? 5 and 6 is an average. And then Prateek scoffed at me and he was just like, 6? Of course, you drink it all day. It does nothing to me. So I think maybe after this, we're going to do a show and tell of hands of what is your cap of like how many cups of coffee do you drink a day? And then maybe Matt can like...
It can always be more, guys. It can always be more.
Absolutely. From one kind of like favorite beverage of mine to another, which is wine. Sonal, your impact on the beverage industry in India is, it's unparalleled. And I think a lot of us, of course, through the natural progression of this chat, but also we have a little bit of a sense of how the wine education for the Indian consumers evolved. I think the bit that I was really curious about was that you are designing the wine program for Air India. And I just found that really fascinating that in some ways the blueprint one can still understand of a brick and mortar. But to design something at 35,000 feet where your guest has such a differing and diverse palate, what's your process?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the panel, and thank you for that great question. This is officially the first time anybody's asking me about the wine program on Air India, because actually this is not even yet public news. This is nowhere on the internet yet. We're still working on the press release, and we're hoping that it should be out in the next few weeks. But I was recently appointed the wine consultant for Air India. Almost a dream that I must have manifested, because I've been in this industry for the last 17, 18 years and done lots of work across education, consulting and all. But aspirationally, I had saved myself up to be the wine consultant for Air India. I could have pitched for this job with any other airline because, the master of wine, it's very typical for an airline to have a master of wine or a master sommelier on their panel. But I'd saved myself because I just felt that, Air India will go through a metamorphosis one day, and with the privatization, fully privatization, and Tata, family taking over the airline, and with all the investments and all the intent, which I've been directly privy to, I have full confidence that Air India is going to be poised to be among the top 5 airlines in the world in the next few years. So, and I can't wait to be part of that,
Sonal,
a small part of that big revolution.
Crossed fingers and toes on that.
Thank you. But the thing is that everybody wants Air India to do better, right? Like I think Air India is the kind of airline where even if it sort of gives you an inch, we'll give it praise worth an arm in return, because there's an emotional connect. We really, in the heart of our hearts, want Air India to do better. Anyway, that's about Air India pitch. But coming to the designing of the wine program, I think when we started the project and I came on board as a consultant and we talked about it, we said we definitely want to build something that is world-class, something that induces excitement, but it also shows a lot of aspiration and ambition. And let's go all out, let's really design a wine program that puts into place a fantastic wine selection, which I have to say I'm so excited about, because every single wine we've chosen, whether it's a Grand Cru Bordeaux or a Top Burgundy or a Super Tuscan, names of which I cannot disclose just yet, but they're all going to be, they're iconic brands. They're going to be brands we're going to be feeling a lot of pride drinking on top. And we've made the entire change across the economy, premium economy, business, as well as first. And I think, Ani, when you design a wine program for an airline, as I said, you must show ambition, you must show aspiration, you must show a sense of discovery. There has to be a sense of discovery, but also keeping in mind, Shreya, what you correctly pointed out, which is how do our taste buds react at 35,000 feet above sea level? Because they do clamp up, and we taste less fruit and sweetness, and we taste more bitterness and more acidity. So the tannins, and I hope I'm not getting too technical, but you experience more acidity, more tannins, and wines tend to taste a bit more austere in the skies than they do on the ground. So you have to keep in mind that. Not to mention, you have to keep in mind the meals that are being provided, and you've got to find sort of crowd-pleasing wines that sort of one size fits all. So the kind of wines that will go with a range of dishes that will be served on the airline. And not to mention keeping in mind the commercial considerations, the fact that the first class needs to be that much more sexier than business class selection and all the way down the chain. So all of these things were taken into consideration, and we did many rounds of tastings, some blind, so to take out bias. That's what we do in the world of wines. You sort of do blind tastings to take out any element of bias. And then I had the great honor and pleasure of also presenting the wine selection to the chairman of Tata Sons, which is Mr. Chandra Sekharan, who was very pleased. So that was the epitome.
But I think that bit that you spoke about, which is the moments of discovery, a big part of that today for consumers across all ranges, age ranges, and even categories and consumer cohorts, a lot of that discovery is happening online. Digital transformation, specifically, I would say, track back to T-5 years, it's actually shaped a lot of points of what we eat, where we eat, what we drink, shaped also how we consume stuff. And I think, Anjali, you've managed to really leverage that so incredibly and impactfully, not just for building a community for your festivals, but also how do you, I think the bit that everyone is curious about is that how do you leverage that to also further brand engagement with that consumer, leveraging this piece?
Thank you, Shreya. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's one word that we've heard everyone kind of say repeatedly, right? The word community and culture. And 10 years back when, we started Food Talk, it was similar to, I guess, Matt, how you started, where it was just an experiment of like passion. And it was like, can we make something of this? And the idea was to create the world's largest digital table and have everyone sit together and have conversations around food, but in a digital context, because food in itself is sort of like this one language that ties everyone together. It kind of separates all barriers and it becomes this one unanimous language. And we got people to come in and have real-time conversations where it wasn't about what you were reading about by a food critic, but it was empowering every person to have an opinion, because you are the consumer that is going out there and you're the consumer that is having these experiences. So the idea was of creating this, massive community table and have people engage and have all of these incredible conversations about who, what, when, where, what you should have, etc. And, for us, that somewhere turned into building other properties and businesses, which wasn't something that we had actually ever intended in doing. But what we got was the power of understanding what does the consumer really want. And I mean, like you asked, how do we leverage that for brands? It kind of happened in a very organic fashion where brands came to us and said, hey, listen, you have the pulse of what the consumer wants. How do we get in on that? How do we, get a buy-in on knowing what they want and how we need to be building our brands? And it was, yet another experiment, I guess, when organically we started working within that space where we said, okay, you know what you want as an end goal on who you want to talk to, but you don't necessarily know how to position yourself in that space. And that's why we kind of came in and started bridging that gap of brand can identify, like, who you want your target consumer to be, but how do you position yourself to be a part of their everyday life, to be that friend that they want to come home and that cup of coffee that they want to wake up and have? Why your brand in specific? And that's where we come in and kind of build that narrative for them from the understanding of what that consumer really wants. And, it's been incredible to work with some of the biggest brands, especially we specialize more in the alcobev space, but whether it's homegrown or whether it's global brands, to help them kind of build that narrative and just really change the way a brand would want to build itself in this country. And I know in a lot of cases, it's been big fights on experiments that we've wanted them to take. And in a lot of times, they look at us like, are you absolutely, and I'm sure you get this because you do this as well, right? You're absolutely, sorry for my bad language, fucking nuts. But I guess that's that's a gamble of how I've enjoyed building this as a space, is to do things that are absolutely fucking nuts every day. And to build stories and narratives for brands to reach out to the people that they actually want to, because we have that one thing that they can never have, is knowledge on what the consumer really wants. And
Is there like 3 things that you've observed specifically post-lockdown of this consumer and part of your community who's sitting online?
Yeah.
Are there any kind of like behavioral characteristics that you're noticing about this consumer today?
I mean, the landscape is constantly changing, and I think that access to information became the biggest thing during, the lockdown and the pandemic, and people were just aware of so much more. They spent all of that time to kind of up their knowledge in everything possible, and now there is a demand for better, whether it is eating better, drinking better, sipping better coffee. I think we spend so much time at home making the same amount of money that our disposable income went up. And I think people have, in very many ways, moved towards wanting finer things in life. I think that, and I know this is, of course, going to be your next part of your conversation, but why do concept spaces like NAAR work is because the consumer is now ready to go out there and spend that money in having something incredible versus just a regular meal or just an instant cup of coffee or just a basic wine. I think that there is so much of awareness of wanting and being able to get more that that is where we're seeing things move towards, and I think it's incredible to be in this space at this time, to be able to make things move.
So there's this like awareness, which is heightened, and then there's also this demand or like a need for upgrading the product and service. Okay, amazing. But in line with exactly what Anjali said, I think like from the monk who sold his Ferrari to the gentleman who kind of like gave up, life in a buzzy city and moved to setting up dining in the hills. I don't even know where to start because it's such an incredible, fascinating story. I remember we met at the Leela some years back at Jyoti's event, and that's when Prateek was telling me about the early starts of NAAR. I have never seen his eyes twinkle the way it did that day. It was just so fascinating. And in so many ways, I mean, I know you completed a year last November. So in like a span of 14, 16 months, in so many ways, you've paved the path of destination dining in India. Why, how, what drives you even further?
NAAR was always an ambitious project. I guess this was always a dream, and sometimes in life it's with everybody. In life we have these windows where you can take risks and jump, right? And I was in that phase of my life where I really jumped and I started pursuing this dream. A lot of people said, all the well-wishers were like, why are you wasting money, etc., etc. But I guess, I was doing an interview a few years back, and I said this is the most exciting time for Indian F&B because consumer behavior is changing, economics is changing, a lot of things are changing in the market. Cut to, I decided, okay, forget it, I'll open this restaurant. But 2 things. One thing, between me and my partners, we're ready to fail. In the sense, yes, this is an ambitious project. If it works, it'll be great. But if it doesn't work, we need to shut shop and, move somewhere else. But at the end, after 1 year, the concept is working. We started with a team of 6. It was me and 3 people just cooking every single day, cooking, cleaning, and we had 2 people just in front of the house. Today, it's a 16-seater restaurant, but we are almost 21 people running the show. But I guess a lot of things in terms of economics are changing today. I think I was telling you that our biggest markets, so we're not in Kasauli, we're 45 minutes away from Kasauli. It's in a very small village. There's no reason for anybody in the world to be there unless you live there. But our 2 biggest markets right now are Bombay and Bangalore, followed by Delhi. And the 2 upcoming markets are Hyderabad and Chennai. right? So that speaks a lot about how today Indians are looking at dining, how they are ready to spend money for experiences. And a concept like NAAR, if it was 5 years back, I don't think it would have worked at all. I mean, it's still for us, all our projections, the Excel sheet and budgets all went to trash. And now we are restarting again, because 1 year, for me, it was a big learning. My best friends are accountants, CAs, and lawyers now. So there is something major happening in India, and I think, we are at the cusp of something big. I think it's a renaissance period for Indian F&B, and man, we are at just a starting point.
I'm really fascinated by that, right? Because I feel like when we were tracking Blue Tokai story in 2013, we can say this in hindsight, right? That it was at the cusp of something really blowing up in terms of a demand for that kind of coffee in India. And then you're saying that about also that format of dining in India. I think two parts of this question. One is, what differentiates you from urban fine dining? And the second bit is the bit that you said that about your principal guests are from Bangalore and Bombay.
Yeah.
As opposed to, naturally speaking, just speaking from distance-wise, I would have imagined, is Chandigarh or Delhi, right? And I think the bit is also like I asked Anjali, what about that guest?
Yeah.
Like, what behavioral trait is prompting someone from Bangalore to trek out for a meal at NAAR?
I don't know. To be honest, I guess few reasons. Number one is, I think people are seeking out experiences. And it's just fascinating just to take a flight, drive for 2 hours. And it's a lot of pressure. And between me and my team, we discuss this every single day, that we can't have a bad day, right? Because a person is coming, spending a lot of time, energy, money to be here. So between us, I think there's a lot of things that we do as a team, so that physically, mentally, we are just we are game on. And the experience at NAAR is, those 2 hours are also, there's no sort of branding. It's only on Google Maps that people figure out where we are. So we get a lot of, not complaints, but people are like, no, you should say at least NAAR is 4 kilometers away or 3 kilometers away, or where exactly that is. So although it's a complaint, but it becomes a very important conversation point. Whenever you're discussing about the restaurant, you'll say, oh my God, I got lost and I had to take a turn. So that is one, as an experience. But when you reach there, you just don't start. We're on a sort of, we're tucked inside a pine forest. And whatever you're doing at NAAR, although it's a 16-seater restaurant, but we have, imagine 5 Lego boxes that we have just placed in the mountains. So the experience starts from 1 Lego box or 1 room to a different room, and then you come back. So whatever you're doing, you're washing dishes, or you are cooking, or you're dining, or you're using the washroom, you're always looking at mountains. So the idea was to make it really experiential, and then there's a lot of other factors. Food, beverage, I'd say it's only 35% of an experience, and that is exactly what your question is. What makes it different? For a guest experience, I feel it's not the larger things, it's the smaller thing that really matters, and that's what we focus on. For a great restaurant, you'll always expect great service, great food, right? But I guess it's all about in the softer touches that we really focus our energies on. Yeah.
And what about the consumer? Are there 2 things that you're noticing in terms of I'm trying to plot out who this consumer is, who is taking out a bigger percentage of the disposable income for destination dining in India in 2025?
To be honest, and they're not the 1 or 2% of riches in India.
Okay.
It's the middle class and upper middle class. They are seeking out experiences. We have every age group coming in. We have a lot of parents coming in. November, December was a time where a lot of sort of NRI, people who were visiting family, they would get their family. People are celebrating their birthdays, anniversary of their parents. So I think that's really nice that, every genre is coming in, but it's mostly like middle, upper middle class who have that disposable income to spend, and they are seeking out experiences. Like, yeah.
No, that's incredible. I think
But-
speaking of experiences, I think another person who's kind of building out something similar is, when you spoke about the Holland House in Nasik, I found it so interesting. I was hooked, ready to book. My partner and I actually travel for wine. So for me, the idea of, a luxurious, immersive experience centered around wine available in India of a certain quality. What prompted you to do that? And more specifically, how Prateek mentioned that there seems to be something about the market dynamic right now, making it a little bit more ripe and ready for destination dining. Are you picking up on certain trends of like, this could be the right time where people are going to spend on this?
I think there couldn't be a better timing, but just to put it in context about what the Holland House is.
Yes, please.
The Holland House is like a homestay, a 5-bedroom sort of a villa that we've built in Igatpuri, Nashik, which is widely regarded as the wine capital of the country, where 80% of the wineries of India are located. And we've kind of tried to design it like a French chateau style architecture. And, I've done it with a lot of love and passion. So I've not built it like an owner who's going to rent it out to somebody. I've built it like a place where I'd love to stay myself. So lot of love, care, and investment, I would say. And it's kind of a nice, luxurious place built to a certain standard for wine lovers to come, stay, enjoy. And we'll curate wine experiences. And these will be ranging from going for winery tours during the day, or maybe cooking with wine in the afternoon, maybe a quick 1-hour crash course on wine, sort of something early evening, ending with sundowners, and then perhaps indulgent wine dinners. And I'm hoping Prateek will come and cook. So, one of those, So a nice, well-appointed 14-seater dining table.
Nice.
So kind of done it to taste, yeah? So that's what the Holland House project is. And Shreya, you really have the knack of asking me what I'm talking about for the very first time in public
Yes,
arena.
that's your
because
breaking
it's
news
very,
number
very,
2.
This project is just, again, hot off the oven, but very excited about it. What prompted me to start the Holland House was that I've had the pleasure of traveling to several wine regions all around the world. And I've stayed at chateaus, I've experienced the hospitality of staying in a chateau and so on. And this may sound very cheesy, but my first instinct always was, labor in India is so cheap, we should build an architecture like this in India. Because why can't we have something like this we can build? But really, this project fuses my passion for wine, passion for travel, passion for experiences, and all of that sort of came together. And I thought, here's a place we could build here, right here in Nashik, and give people, and wine tourism is also growing. I don't know if we are even acutely sort of aware of this and noticing this around us, but along with, there's something very profound somebody once said to me. People pay for 4 or 5 types of experiences at a premium. So they'll pay a premium for wildlife, for example, like a wildlife holiday, or sports tourism, any kind of sport destination, adventure sports or something like that. 3, we pay a premium for beach resorts, like beach. 4th is pilgrimage. We pay a little bit of a premium to stay where we go for a cultural or a pilgrimage sort of a context. And these are all experiences, by the way. Since we're talking about experiences, I thought I'll mention that. And the 5th, that gentleman at the time said to me, he said, and people pay for wine tourism. And this is a known fact globally, but in India, it's just, the wine part is just sort of taking off now. And I thought, I need to do something in this space, straight away. So that's where the inspiration sort of emanated from. But we've just launched the Holland House again, and very excited about it.
Now my personal therapy session where I have questions to ask them specifically. So I'll kick off with my first one, and Matt, this one is for you. So I'm working on a project which is like a 360 marketing project for a large FMCG brand that operates in India. And in the early brainstorms, I remember the CEO looking at me and basically dismissing my idea and said, you know, we all dream about speaking to India. I want to sell to Bharat. And what they were kind of like signaling towards was the opportunity and the scale that operates outside perceived consumer bubbles. As someone who's had this incredible scale-up journey, are there any kind of like consumer myths that burst and popped along the way?
I think one thing is that for a long time people thought coffee won't work in India, that India is a tea-drinking nation, especially when we were trying to raise money. That's always been a question that comes up. How big is the TAM for people who are drinking coffee? Do people even understand what specialty coffee is? You're already in a niche, now you're trying to go to a niche of a niche. And I think one myth is that product really matters. So people are not going to be able to understand the nuance of, they're not going to say that, okay, I taste all these flavor notes in this coffee, right? But when they taste it, they understand that it's something very different from the commodity coffees that are available. So I think that being able to sort of communicate what your value proposition is very important. And I think also, at the end of the day, it is still a very price-sensitive market. You see that some of the foreign brands that are coming, they're charging very high prices for their offering, with the idea that because we're foreign, Indian consumers should pay a premium for us. That mindset is totally gone. Indian consumers are very happy to support domestic brands. They would prefer to support domestic brands, and you know, these foreign brands are actually struggling to figure out what their positioning is within the market.
That's really incredible. I want to say the number of times I hear your brand being referenced as a successful case study, specifically for like emerging categories like, say, kombucha, and how they reference to, you know, the ones who paved the way for craft coffee is always just such a joyous moment. But speaking of like that price point, and Prateek and Anjali, I'm going to get you guys to weigh in, is also like maybe just the economics of the trade. There's this bit about, okay, the consumers wanting to upgrade their choices, product or service. But how does that actually translate on the P&L, on the business side? Like, are brands, products, restaurants, what is it? Is it as ripe as it is? And is it mirroring the robustness of the consumer demand?
I think it's a very wide space, to be honest, because like Prateek mentioned, I mean, people for celebrations will come to a restaurant like NAAR, but they also need to have experiences that they can access on an everyday basis, right? So I think you kind of need to look at that narrative from a much broader perspective of there is a consumer out there who's willing to want more, but not necessarily on an everyday basis want to spend that much more. So I think it's got to be a wide spectrum, and I think any category right now, for example, coffee as a category was booming and is booming and will continue to boom. And you know, I'll take a personal reference of something like this is, you know, 5 years back we started a property called the Gin Explorers Club because we were trying to build on a category called gin, which was very unheard of then, right, for a very whiskey-dominated country. But the reason why it became big is because the economics of it worked, because you had brands that were at an accessible price point, like a Greater Than, which was 1,200 rupees a bottle. And on the other end of it, you have a spectrum of brands that are at like 5, 7, 8, 10,000 rupees. And, you know, we conducted a very large study recently for the category of tequila right now because, you know, how everyone's talking, it's really having its moment. But can it become as big as, you know, the other spaces have? That's where the challenge is coming right now, because you don't have accessibility to that product right now for a mass scale perspective. So I think while the larger consumer wants to jump in on trends, you still need to have accessibility across multiple price points. And that's where, my personal thinking is, as long as there's a wide enough spectrum of things, that's where the economics of it makes sense, because you're making it available for the everyday man as well as someone who's really looking for something luxurious as well. But of course, I'm sure you have your own take on it, because you're on a very different end of that spectrum.
See, the NAAR anyways is a very sort of, it's becoming that aspirational restaurant. So for us, like people who are walking in, they just want to be there and they would just want to celebrate. So for us, like, the kind of money a person would spend at a regular restaurant, they make it multiply by 5, because the only reason is because they have made that effort to be there, and they just want to make that 2 or 3 hours count. So our economics is very different from a regular restaurant, because it's the mindset also.
Your economics is mind-boggling for most of us, but it's incredible that that it's making sense. Because I remember
it's making sense, and it's making sense economically. Forget the aspirational part of it. Yeah. For a 16-seater restaurant to be in middle of nowhere, just making sure we're making profits. That is, for me, like, that's one of the biggest learnings. And now, we're sitting on the drawing board, figuring out, how we can spend this year in terms of experiences. And the idea is to really build on experiences. The idea is to give you that sort of world-class experience when you walk into NAAR. I guess that's the idea and intent just for this year.
One piece of advice for someone entering this line of work, something that maybe would have helped you when you were starting your career. And then if we can just go down the room about that one aha kind of piece of advice for anyone entering this industry, what would it be?
For me, anybody who's aspiring to be a chef, honestly, at least first 5 years, work on your craft. Get a mentor, follow that mentor, learn from him or her, and just shut up and cook, because cooking for me, like, it's an art form, and you really have to spend time. You cannot be you can never be a master. In my opinion, you can never be a master. You're just evolving every single day. So it's like being a doctor. You're not the master, but there's always something to learn. So shut up and cook, and at least 5 years, keep your head down and just follow.
I love that, Prateek. I was almost going to say that, but now I have to think of another point. Okay, so I would say act upon your ideas. And this is very broadcasting, because it could be food, wine, law, design, whatever it is that you're looking to get into. I've truly believed, and I've experienced in my own life, that ideas are like atoms. They're traveling in the air. And, when an idea hits you, I truly believe it hits 10 other people, or maybe thousands other people. So the idea almost never belongs to the person who gets it first. It belongs to the one who acts on it first. Because so many times it happens that an idea hits us and we say, I'll get to it, and we don't act on it. And then a few months later, we see someone else has acted on it. And then you curse yourself and you think, damn, I was supposed to do that. And that's when you get the FOMO of not having acted upon your idea. But that person probably, got that atom at the same time that you did. So I think act upon your ideas, act on all of them, try many different things, and no doubt you'll fail at some. Those will fall by the wayside, but some areas you will truly succeed, and you will, race on and make something out of it. That would be my advice.
I think learn how to say no. Especially when you're starting out, every opportunity you just want to do and grab it, no matter how big or how small, you end up saying yes to everything just because you're trying to hustle and get your business going. But a lot of those things end up taking more time than they're worth. And if you were to just say no to more things and focus on kind of what your core is, I think it leads to a much better outcome. So I think that's something that I've learned the hard way.
We have shut up, we have chop chop, we've got say no, and then we've got the fourth tip.
I think a culmination of all of them, but like the one that I think is just that annoying voice in my head that I've learned over time to try and shut up is stop chasing perfection, because I think sometimes we are so obsessed with finding that perfect version of what we want to do that we don't actually get down to doing it. And that just never is going to be achieved. So roll with what you have and like make something happen off it, because sometimes you never know how beautiful that can be. So yeah.
That's amazing. That seems to be like also like the perfect cherry on the cake to wrap this up. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I learned from this chat. Thank you.